standing here thinking about
Okay, so we got it.
Oh, I saw you as Margaret.
Are you getting our monthly e-blast? Are you getting the monthly e-blast?
So we want you to put a blue dot generally where you live. I'll get you. And so we're trying to get kind of a representation of where people are coming from.
Okay. Okay.
I know I saw it, Grace.
It is Anna.
Are you getting our...
I've not really paid a lot of attention to where this stuff is, but yes, this is just the site.
Yes. And the lady that's coming that I have her ticket, you don't need it, right? She signed up for it.
Sears?
Okay.
Yes? Okay. Edward Sears. So, are you a resident? That's okay.
One dog? That's where I put mine, right there.
And I am a Do we take two if you're a resident? Just one. I understand.
Great. And do you receive our city emails? We send out a blast once a month with updates about what's going on throughout the city projects.
No, I'd like to. Okay, so this is where we play. Is that what this means?
That's where we get.
Okay. Good evening. Thank you for being here. This is a lot of folks. Thank you so much. We have got about 150 folks in the room. There's some folks online on Zoom, about 15 or 20 folks, I believe. I want to introduce myself and talk about what we're going to do tonight. And I very much appreciate you donating your time for this conversation. And I do want to start off by saying that I realize that this is a very special character place, and it has very special meaning to the folks that live and work here, and that this particular site that we're going to talk about has got a lot of emotion tied to it, and that there's been some healthy and robust community debate over the last many years.
What?
I understand those things. So what I want to accomplish tonight is some discussions about kind of values and character, and I'll dive into that. But let me just begin by introducing myself, and I'm going to talk a little bit about kind of what our group is and what we do as a practice. I am the director of a urban design and planning studio called the Community Solutions Group. I moved to Florida out of the Midwest, a large land grant institution, in 1990 to work on projects at Walt Disney World, and which is sort of like hitting the jackpot, you know, sort of. If you're in the Midwest, it seems super exciting. But after a few years, you start to think about, you know, I would really like to work in real communities if I'm really going to stay here in Florida for the rest of my life, which I am going to do. So I've now lived here 32 years, whereas I lived in the other place 24 years. So I am very passionate about Florida's character towns and about discovering them and understanding them. And the studio that we run includes a number of people that are here in the room. I don't know if you can kind of raise your hand, but Tom Kohler is hanging some stuff up on the wall that you've written. Wes Schaefer is in the back. He's a planner. He's helping both with the whole setup here, but also just running the Zoom and the tech. And Laura Smith is with our group, and she's going to be also helping to facilitate. And I don't know where, then there's Laura. Just like that. The idea of our group, for those of you that can see the screens, whatever screen is closest for you, is that we try to look at community in a very holistic way. And the practice that we run really goes from visioning and master planning to landscape architecture, detail urban design, Also financial aspects of how do you put together a funding or financial package or a financing plan. So we really run the whole gamut of working with communities. We also work for some private developers. And I think what's valuable about that is, my interest in life is that the local and authentic communities of Florida are healthy and vibrant and sustainable and authentic to the people that are there. And I think to really do that, you have to understand a little bit about working for the community directly, as we're doing tonight. But you also have to kind of have some understanding of what is going on out in the development world and what those people are thinking about. And so whenever we're working with developers, we're trying to help them understand what a community is trying to achieve and kind of move them towards the vision of the community. So we're not here with a specific agenda, but we have a lot of tools. I mentioned to someone earlier, we have a lot of tools in the toolkit. We've worked throughout Florida. We've worked actually throughout the eastern U.S. I haven't done much west of the Mississippi, but pretty much everywhere east of the Mississippi, I've worked in some region of the country in cities of all different sizes. So when we talk about kind of visioning things, we work directly with communities, as you can see here. We draw things, and we actually work on projects and build things. We work concept to construction, planning to policy. So we know what it takes to get things done. We know what can make for a very contentious and unhappy community. And we like to think that we know how to help guide things in a way that reflects community vision. And so we have been, working in all different types of situations. All different, personalities. This is Wauwatosa, Wisconsin. Does anyone know where Wauwatosa is? Where's Wauwatosa? I love this. Boom. It's like the first rail stop town outside of Milwaukee. It's a really high character, 150 to 200-year-old traditional town. We worked on their entire village, and it was pretty exciting. This is in St. Pete and parts beyond. So the goal, and I think what the struggle, in terms of a community conversation in wherever we work, is always to figure out what can we align around? What are the things that we share that are of common importance and common values to everyone? And so our assignment, we were asked to come and facilitate a discussion tonight that really is about values. What we're doing, our assignment has essentially got 3 parts and then maybe a 4th part. The first thing I want to say is that tonight is about ideas and input. We're not going to make any decisions tonight about anything regarding the land. There's not going to be a specific plan. There isn't going to be any, let's go get, this group to go and build that thing. None of those, that's not what tonight is about. We are here to talk about shared vision and mission for the town center site. And to do that, we have to kind of put on our imagination hats for a minute. I know that there's been conversation about let's do nothing on this property, or let's do, let's make sure that this doesn't happen, or that we, let's essentially not move on the property. The option to not move on the property is obviously always there. The question is, if something were to happen on the property, what would be the kind of thing that the community would could get excited about, and that would reflect the community's values about what's important to you? And we have different ways we want to ask this question. So we kind of have to just put on our, like I said, sort of our imagination game hats. And we're not here to talk about, should we do something or should we not do something, or let's just leave it the way it is forever. That sort of a thing. I mean, that's a discussion for another platform. This is about, if you really looked at your community and really looked at the site and said, well, what if something did happen on that property? What would be the kind of thing that would be additive to my experience as a person that lives and works in Oldsmar. So then we're going to do a second piece. We know that the city has gotten some unsolicited proposals for the property. And these are like, it's just like flash paper, right? What do you do with this? Where did this come from? I don't like this. Where, how did this come about? Where did this idea come from? So the city essentially called us and said, try to obtain the community's value set, and then rather than letting the world come to us and tell us what they would like to do to us, why don't we take a couple of step process and see if there's anyone that's interested in what we're interested in. So we are going to develop with the city what's called a letter of interest that would go to investment development groups out in the world, and the letter of interest would be sort of a statement of the things that you value and that would be interesting and successful for you on that site. Okay? If enough letters of interest come in by folks that are qualified, that know what they're doing, and are committed to the vision, okay, we will help the city evaluate those responses. And at that point, in the future, there's a potential future assignment, which would be to say, we got these letters of interest. These are the candidates that we really think are qualified to maybe do something that is in concert with what the community would like. And if that's the case, then we can make a decision in the future if we would actually like to issue what's called a request for proposals. And the request for proposals would be much more detailed, and they would have to put forth a plan and all the kind of details, what the financial aspect of it would be. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to say, well, if something happened, what would we like? And then say, well, is there anyone else out there in the world that would be interested in doing something that is along the lines of what we would like? And then let's review that and talk about it. And if we actually think that there's some places where our vision and the development vision, are aligned, then maybe we proceed to an RFP and see if somebody can really show us something that we can get excited about. And even after all of that, you might have 3 or 4 or 5 respondents to an RFP, and it still becomes a community decision and a city council decision as to whether or not you proceed or alter or do nothing. So tonight's experiment, or again, imagination game, is if something happened, what would be the kind of thing that would be helpful? Now, what we're going to do tonight is we want to try to develop a community-driven vision statement for the roughly 8.5-acre site, which is known as the City Hall Town Center site. You know that the site has been identified in the CRA plan for really since the inception of the CRA as a town center opportunity, and it is a primary mission of the CRA to do something to reposition that property. We know you've had a lot of discussions, and so what we want to do tonight is we want to explore and articulate the shared community objectives that you have that would make a meaningful addition to Oldsmar. This input and everything that you write down, we're going to collect, we're going to type it up, we're going to categorize it, and we're going to use everything that we hear tonight to try to organize into something that we can present to City Council on August 2nd that says, here's the things that we heard from the community. I'm from Orlando. I don't have a dog in this hunt. I'm here to try to be the translator of what you all are going to write and say tonight. Okay? Does that make sense? Imagination caps on? I know everybody would love it to be a giant park, and we can talk about that. But let's think about what if there was some sort of a town center type thing. What does town center mean to you? That's really the question for tonight. So I'm going to do a little bit of presenting. We're going to do some exercises. We'll do a little bit of talking. We can't go through every table and have everybody talk. So the first thing I'd like you to do is just quickly identify somebody who can be a table captain, because there will be somebody that I want to have kind of run the table at the end when you start consolidating things that you're writing down. and then we'll get to conclusions and next steps. So the first thing that I want to maybe share with you is just sort of some thoughts about community and some observations that we've made about just Oldsmar in general, and that we want to know if we're sort of on base or sort of not on base. And ultimately, we're going to see it because we're going to see it in your words. But we've spent a good amount of time, Wes and I have, really walking a lot of the neighborhood streets, hitting the parks. We've attended a number of your restaurants and observed many of you doing interesting things with golf carts and bicycles and everything else. If somebody's house is in the picture, we didn't pick your house intentionally. We just wanted to get a house that would reflect a characteristic that we see that we sort of noticed when we were here. But let's talk about community a little bit. Community is a hard thing to put your arms around. And of course, we all see these really complicated maps with lines and colors and, this zone and that overlay and whatever it is. The bottom line to me is that community is really only about 6 things. It's places to live, it's commercial, places where you can shop or work. There's civic buildings like City Hall or a school or a church. There's parks and the natural environment. And then I've got circulation here in the middle. Circulation is how do you get around? So that's really all there is. That's most of what is in a community. I mean, we can exclude airports and other stuff, although technically I guess you could say that's a civic use. But really, this really is community. And so we all remember the game Tetris, right? At least I do. It's really a discovery process of figuring out where these things are and how they fit together in a given town. And every community is different. It's certainly Wauwatosa doesn't look anything like Oldsmar, right? But they really care about their town. You better believe it. So Oldsmar, as many of you know, is a really interesting planned community that dates to the 1920s with Mr. Olds of Oldsmobile fame. This Wayne Stiles that did this plan did this community plan with this kind of hub on the water with the community open space. Originally a hotel planned here, and this kind of hub and spoke idea was very much related to work that was going on at the same time in city planning by Frederick Law Olmsted, who was a landscape architect and a city planner, as well as a fellow named John Nolan. Who did the original city plan for St. Petersburg. The reason I point this out is for those of you that have heard of the new urbanism or traditional town planning, and which really probably the most significant initial plan was Seaside, and then later on Celebration, and then you can go downhill from there. Those plans from the last 30 years are all derivative of these plans. And really, Frederick Law Olmsted, John Nolan, Stiles, there's 4 or 5 of them, and those were the guys that were really on the front end of how to plan a community. So you have a community here with a plan that actually is of material significance in terms of just the history of city planning. It's a model community, especially as you get down towards the water and you've got these parkways, leading you from City Hall to the water and so forth. This was an early rendering. This was the hotel. You could see different size things going on here. Maybe some civic buildings, a church, some homes, and so forth. So what happened is, over the next, 50 or so years, the community got constructed, right? But as we all know from the 20s, something really significant happened, which was called the Great Depression. And that was immediately followed by World War II. So things slowed down for a little while, right? And then things started up again in the 50s. And by the 1950s, we were starting to experiment with different ideas about development. And they were primarily organized around this new invention that had become attainable for virtually everybody, which is called the automobile. And so what happened is communities like Oldsmar that were really based on an interconnected, walkable city grid with easy access to parks and the basic aspects of community life. Can you get to a civic building? Can you get to a place to shop? Can you get to, et cetera, et cetera? And is it easy to navigate that on foot, on a bicycle, in an automobile, whatever? Really what happened after the 50s was we really started to change our thoughts about city planning. And it was really about sort of suburban patterns, and this led to suburban sprawl, and the idea of kind of corridor-based development. So what you see in Oldsmar is you see sort of the original plan intact, but then you see a different style of development happening not just along the corridor, but north of the corridor and in other places. So we're dealing kind of with two different time periods here. And we all know that that leads to two different outcomes, and we're going to talk about those outcomes, because what's interesting about this site, and I think what makes this site such a touch point for so many people, is that this site literally is at the interface of those two eras of planning. And the question becomes, well, what do we do about it? So let's go back to our basic elements of community. We can walk around town. I won't go through like all 6 in order necessarily, but we can see some of the character and values that you have about the presence of civic buildings, the presence of public art, respect for veterans and for the history and prior contributors to your community, however they served. We see a lot of values about the environment, and whether it's obviously the Bay, but things like interpretive information about the sensitivity of the natural environment, the community gardening as places to come together, places to recreate and get out on a canoe. Folks playing this crazy new game that has completely displaced tennis and racquetball. It's bananas when you go to a sporting goods store. All those other games are gone, and now I forget the name. Pickleball. Yeah, pickleball's taken over. If you go to like a sporting goods place, it's like there's like 3 tennis rackets, 1 racquetball, and then there's like 4 rows of pickleball equipment. It's crazy. We also see the character and values of being able to bicycle and walk and golf carts and really navigate your community safely and quietly and kind of on your own terms. The other thing that's interesting is we can see a little bit of this thing about time in the housing. We can see the original bungalow housing, right? We can see sort of the 1950s and 60s, what you would call, what now has been coined mid-century modern, but ranch houses, We see redevelopment, places where homes have been reinvested for something at a little bit higher value or price point, maybe a little more square footage, just to reflect the fact that Oldsmar is a valuable place because it's got a heck of a plan, right? The street grid dictates the plan. And the other thing, the reason I put these 2 photos on here is, whether you live in a more kind of humble home, maybe from that 1950s era, or you live in a great big new home, at a completely different price point, there's still some kind of shared values about quality of life. It was interesting to me how many different homes at whatever price point, everybody's got a boat, everybody's got a bike, there's golf carts all over the place. So I do believe that no matter what your income level is or what your station in life is, I think there's some real shared reasons why people love to be in Oldsmar. Is that a fair statement? Did I hit on a few of them? So if you were to think of this Tetris game and maybe take like one photo that's like sort of like the ultimate sort of emblematic photo of Oldsmar, this might be one. I mean, we pulled it out of our deck of photos that we shot. But what you see is you see big trees, you see canopy, you see single family homes, you see, the parkway that leads from essentially State Street all the way to the water, bicycle access, slow driving, so that's really to me important. And I think that the idea here is that these elements of community, they reflect not only values and we talked about character and values, time, quality of life, but they also reflect form and function. Because as you saw in your plan from the 1920s, you can arrange these Tetris pieces in whatever way you want. You can do them in a suburban corridor sort of a way, or you can do them in sort of a 1920s traditional town sort of a way. You can do them big, you can do them little, right? So what's interesting is when you go to Oldsmar for the first time, as I did a few weeks ago, I get an image of a town center. So I say, great. So I come in, and I see the historic bank building. And obviously, at the time that this was built, this is a very important edifice, and it symbolizes, commerce, center of economic activity, et cetera, et cetera. And you also see some values right from the get-go. You know, the bike lane leading you to the water. You know, you're here at City Hall, you're at what used to be the bank. You know, there were a couple of other stores in the area, and you know, you go straight to the water. There's also some challenges, though, that you see here as I'm in this one town center that you have. Is, for one thing, there is some new development, but it feels like the streetscape isn't quite finished, and the development is fairly quiet, which is okay, but some of it's so quiet that it's actually vacant, which seems like sort of a problem. And some of it is so vacant that it's actually empty. And I think as I sort of drove by Oldsmar, I was kind of like, where is it? You know, I had to figure out that I had to kind of turn in and then discover this incredible gem, right? So in some sense, you know, the incredible gem of these neighborhoods is kind of protected by this area of kind of either vacant land or the other town center, which comes in a different form. So you have this other town center, and what this town center is about, this is about corridor post-World War II style development. So what does that mean? You get there in your car. You generally get there by getting out onto a big road called a collector road. There is a couple of back ways in, but generally you go to the big road. There's some perfectly good businesses here, and there's a couple of them that I really enjoy the food. But you know, it's a little bit of an adventure to get there, and you got to know it's there. And in fact, in the back of this, what's really driving this is actually some hotel clusters that are back here that are really being used by people that are coming to stay here and then go to the beach or go somewhere else, right? And in fact, there's actually a wall behind this, kind of separating this from the neighborhood. So this is sort of a town center in a way, and I'm sure that you as locals, you use some of these businesses, right? Right? There was I think a taco place I went to on the north side that was just fantastic. But lots of good places here. But this also has its own kind of problems. Like, remember that bike lane picture that I showed from the first town center? Like, there's kind of a different idea about personal safety and mobility out on this road, right? It's a different bicycle sign, right? It's like there might be a bike lane ahead, right? And you might be able to cross the street. I mean, would you want your kids to cross that street? I know I wouldn't want my parents to cross that street, and I certainly wouldn't want my little girl to cross that street. And it's kind of like a drive-by kind of feeling as opposed to a drive-to kind of feeling, right? So you look at it from the air, and you know, we go back to sort of form and function, and what we see is a lot of really important things. I mean, we need to have hotels, right? I mean, thank goodness, thank you to the Hampton Inn for hosting us tonight. I mean, and I love Hampton Inns, by the way. I have my card. I have points. But the other thing that's in here is there's actually a lot of really interesting employment. There's actually some very innovative employment. And I've got a roster of some particular companies. I decided not to show it because I didn't want to like leave somebody out. But beyond some quality businesses in this area, there's actually some very innovative, cutting-edge manufacturing businesses in forward-leaning technology. Nevertheless, when you drive this corridor, it's just the whole scale of it just, I think from a human point of view, just gets confusing. I mean, this building that we're in is actually about an 8-story building. It's over 100 feet tall, roughly. But it's hard to really understand scale and space. There's no street trees. It's just kind of this wide open sort of landscape. And of course, the road is kind of a free-for-all. As opposed to this kind of a setting where I feel a sense of enclosure, and I've got a tree canopy sort of creating a space that's human scale, right? It's like there's a couple of moments where you can almost feel that that town center sign should be there. But then, you know, it kind of goes away because then you've got this large area of vacant land. Now, there are some pretty handsome buildings that have been built, but there's something about them to me that doesn't quite feel right. Because they're not, if you go back to this previous image, you see that there's a relationship between the trees, the sidewalk, the parking, and the building on the opposite side. This whole thing is sort of a composition, right? there's really, it's kind of like sticking out like a sore thumb, so to speak. It's a beautiful building, and I'm sure it costs, I'm sure it's a significant per square foot cost to build this. But it's not really participating in the streetscape. It's not really creating a pedestrian environment, and it's not really part of anything else. So it just kind of feels like this thing that's just kind of sticking out into the landscape, and it's not really part of anything that's kind of composed in the way that the original Oldsmar plan was thinking about composition for neighborhoods and community, right? Make sense? So let me just give a couple more things, and then we'll do our first exercise, and I'm watching the clock here. I'm really going to try hard to keep us on time tonight, because I do respect your time. First of all, so this site is interesting because it's right at this nexus between this world and this world. I mean, what do you do about that? I don't know. Blend them. How do you do that? We'll figure it out. We're going to talk about that tonight. Again, we're having our imagination hats on, so we're going to say, if we did something, what would we do? We can have another discussion at City Council about let's never do anything ever. That's a different discussion. That's not for tonight. Tonight's about your value set for what would be additive to Oldsmar. Okay? The other thing about this site, it's about a 10-minute walk to virtually all of the core neighborhoods, including the school, right? Now, if you could cross the street, it would be a 10-minute walk to a number of the businesses and some of my favorite restaurants, which are right over here. And when you get down to the site itself, it's about 1,200 feet long, which is just about a quarter mile, and it's about 400 feet deep. It holds that depth, and then obviously, it comes to a triangle. In the planning business, we call this a flat iron site because it's like an iron, right? And that's where you see these amazing buildings in, old cities that have a point, at the end of the, think Times Square or whatever, those kind of buildings. So we look at the site and we say, does this feel like a town center? Am I in a place that reflects the values and character of Oldsmar and the reason why people choose to live in Oldsmar? I don't know. We have these different frontages. This is Wes running across the street. I'm safely in my car taking pictures of Wes. So we've kind of got this Tampa Road frontage, which is kind of one environment and one scale. It's very wide. It's very fast. It's a lot of asphalt. You understand this. This isn't rocket science, right? So we kind of have this kind of a character. It's interesting that the most intense investment in terms of landscaping is done in the middle of the road where only the cars can use it, as opposed to the side of the road where the people actually are supposed to be, if anyone was ever willing to actually try that sidewalk out. I wouldn't use it. It's interesting when you come into the site a little bit that just, there's a little area here, it's a little depressional area that is a very, very, very soft kind of drainage way. And there's kind of a mashup of pine and palm and some oak and stuff. But just a little bit of tree planting here, and it's like you can't see the road anymore. It's crazy if you stand there. And what's really amazing is if you stand in the middle of the site, there are some actual serious canopy trees. And look at how they scale this site, and look at how they scale City Hall, and look at how they create space. And when you look at that same tree in a different direction, back towards State Street, you start to see how that tree scales and kind of provides context for the building back here, right? So there's this relationship between what we call the public realm, which is streets, open space, trees, things like this, and how buildings occur in harmony with each other that somehow seems to kind of matter. And it's interesting, when you stand on State Street, it's a very wide road with fairly limited pedestrian facilities. And as far as the trees, they're almost all understory trees. They're crepe myrtles, they're hollies. They're things that are never going to create shade. They're never going to define space. They're always going to look pretty much the day they go in, or maybe after a year or two, that's the best they're ever going to look. And then they're going to go downhill from there. Well, I mean, I'm just stating, I mean, I'm also a landscape architect, and I know about trees. I know about urban trees. I know about trees in streets. So what's interesting then is when you see this, is you see, kind of this, this isn't really a walking environment particularly. There are some real adjacency issues here that are important because you've got this non-residential building here fronting state, and then of course the historic bungalow is right behind, so that's a really important relationship. And then there's some other kind of one-story building stock that maybe have perfectly good businesses in it today, but some of those buildings may be nearing the end of their lifespan. So you have to figure out, what does that mean? So this is where all the controversy is, and I have to give like 30 seconds to this map so that we can move on. We know that you have this town center residential category that you've had an enormous amount of debate about. Here's what's important, or here's what was sort of eye-opening to me, is that incidentally, this is all being recorded on Zoom too. It'll all be on the city's website. And you're welcome to take pictures, but the idea is that that the TCCR is established to provide suitable areas for retailing and other service facilities. Those 6 things that make up community that don't happen in the middle of your neighborhood. So like going, to the bank or going to a restaurant or, going to whatever. That's what could happen here. And it has a current development capability of 30 units to the acre of residential. You could do a hotel at 80. A Hampton Inn like this would be just a little bit over 80 to the acre. Actually, it'd be right about 80 to the acre because they need about 1.5 acres to do 110 keys. And the current zoning allows 75 feet and 6-story of commercial. So you could come into this property pre-2022 or whatever it is that you did last spring. If I go back 2 years ago or 1 year ago, you can come into this property and you can do 75 feet in a 6-story commercial building, on this site. What was interesting is that this ordinance that you passed, to some of you cheer and some of you to your great chagrin. What the ordinance does, it really boils down to just a couple of things. It actually encourages more residential. It goes up to 65 units to the acre and allows for a little bit more dense per acre for a hotel if you could find a spot to put one in, just because the site, has got some, these blocks have got some constraints to them. But the 75 overall building height is the same, except if you want to go above 55 feet, which is sort of nominally a 4-story building, you have to do a 10-foot setback on the building so that urban wall, if you will, is pushed back as it gets to its upper elevations, if you will. And in order to get to any of this, to get to this bonus, you have to do mixed use that has certain types of activities like ground floor retail and other types of performance standards, architecture and things that are going to activate the ground level and actually create a place. So you can come in 2020 and do a 75-foot 6-story commercial building here, or with this ordinance, you could come in here and if you want to do mixed use, you can do a little bit more residential, but you need to activate the ground floor and you need to do some placemaking things. That's essentially what the ordinance does. It sounds like for all the discussion, it must be more complicated than that, but it's really not. So why even focus on it at all? Why am I even here? Why have you been having these conversations at all? And this is about where I'm going to turn it over to you to start working. I mean, the site does not look good. It doesn't reflect well, and it frankly represents blight as you drive by. And it is a clearly stated CRA objective since 1966 to do something about this site. For one thing, it's not generating tax revenue. It's been assembled now with $3.25 million approximately of CRA money to put all the property together. And there's an opportunity, I want to talk about this word blend. There is an opportunity to meet some sort of multifamily residential opportunity that Oldsmar, frankly, doesn't offer right now. There's an opportunity to meet a very high-wage local employment base. You've got about 15,000 residents, but you've got about 1,100 businesses. And those businesses are paying higher wages than the average of Pinellas County. And there are people in those businesses that would love to live somewhere closer to where they work and be part of the Oldsmar story, and be part of your economy and be part of your community. A critical mass, if you get to some amount of residential, that residential could actually support local retail on State Street. So there's some amount that if you could do something, you could actually have restaurants that you could walk to that are actually part of the original composition of the 1927 plan. I mean, that bank building, that edifice didn't get built there for the heck of it. There was an idea, right? It just never got finished. And then when it finally did get built after World War II, it was developed in a suburban fashion, right? So there's really, in my mind, there's kind of an opportunity here for a win-win if we can figure out what the vision is, because there's an opportunity to do some arrival and kind of gateway massing that would scale Tampa Road, but also create character and walkable activities on State Street. And I think, frankly, some guided development through collaboration and going out and finding the type of development group that wants to realize your vision is a much better way to proceed than just, eventually we're going to have to sell this site to the highest bidder and we get what we get. So those are some big thoughts, but does that make sense? Whether you love developing the site or not developing the site, how many folks generally agree with these basic points? We see the elephant in the room. The question is what to do about it. So let me give you some case studies, and then we're going to do an exercise about values and character. So the question is, has this ever been done? And the answer is yes. And a couple of these projects I got to work on. A couple of them, some of my friendly peers got to work on. This is 1792 in Maitland, Florida. This is about, I guess the only thing you can say is it maybe moves a little slower than Tampa just because it's so congested. But this is about, as harsh of a road environment as you can have, right? I mean, this is a photo from recent. So we worked with Maitland. They had this dream. Maitland has Winter Park envy because they don't have Park Avenue, they don't have the shops, and they don't have Central Park, right? They don't have that. And they have wanted a town center, since I moved to Florida and got out of the Disney game and got into, the community planning dialogue, and of course you live in Orlando, and multiple attempts at what to do to try to create some kind of a town center and a town square for Maitland. So we did a plan for Maitland, and I think what's interesting about this relative to Oldsmar is you have the big arterial commercial road, and you have the fine-grained character neighborhoods in a community of choice, which is what Oldsmar is, a community of choice. This is a character community. And the community leads down to the water, and it's rich in the arts, it's rich in the environment, it's rich in walkability, but they just don't have anywhere to go without getting in their car to go have a glass of wine or go, get together with friends or what have you, right? So we did some vision stuff about what sort of a character street that's kind of a town center kind of idea might look like, what it might feel like, what kinds of activities might happen there. And the project got built. Now, you can love this architecture or not love this architecture, but to me, it's too close to the road is the single biggest problem because we can't get big trees growing here. So I'm going to start right off and say it should have been another 10 feet to 15 feet back from the road so that they could put real trees in and not these understory trees. But one thing that it does do is it scales that road. And when you come by this spot, you realize that you're somewhere. It has a really good character restaurant here, and then it steps back on the other side. And what's interesting is back here there's a little street. We created a little street called Independence Lane because they don't have State Street. There was no street at all, just a giant parking lot. So we created this street called Independence Lane, and the back half of the project has got businesses that are working and very active. It's got some residential above, and again, you can say you love it or you don't love it, but I'm talking about pieces and parts here. And then it's right next to this significant park, which we would call public realm, and so and then there's a city hall building right here. So these things are all kind of talking to each other, and it's a very, very active place, and people stream up from the neighborhoods. The folks that live down towards the lake, they stream up here to get a taste of this. And there's special events and things that happen here, and then they walk back to their house.
Where's the parking for those who don't live and walk there?
There is some shared parking that is in that project that's publicly available, and there's parking on the street. And you guys actually have a lot of parking on State Street. But actually, most of the people walk and ride their bikes, or they can, there are a couple of parking opportunities that are in immediate adjacency. So that's just one example. This is another example. Now, this is way over the top. This is way bigger than what you would ever allow, because this is like 8 stories, and it's pushing 100 units to the acre. But this is another interesting project to just reference, because it's kind of got a similar situation. It's got a rail line here. I mean, what would you put next to a rail line? Nothing. I mean, so what they did is they put a little more height against the rail. And over here, there's bungalow neighborhoods and a little local road called Alden. And they started to scale the project down towards the bungalows so that there's a better relationship with the bungalows. And then they did a really interesting amenity thing here. This is called the Yard. And this is essentially a big food hall space, like if you know the Armature Works in Tampa and that sort of thing. So they built this place. And this is within it's sort of at the intersection of a street called Virginia with Orange Avenue, and the neighborhood is called Ivanhoe, and this place is incredibly popular with the folks that live in those neighborhoods to come in here and use this. But the real trick, and again, you can love the architecture or not, and we're not here to talk about architectural style at the moment. I'm just talking about scale and uses. Yeah, I mean, it's meant to be sort of this industrial. It's meant to reference like the old industrial buildings that were along the rail line. That's why it looks the way it looks. So just kind of ignore the appearance of it. But just note that it's stepping down, and it has a better relationship to the street, at essentially 4 stories here. Now, another thing that people get caught up on is they get caught up on this density thing and about numbers. So I think, I'm not a huge fan of yellow, but I think this is a fairly handsome building. I don't think it looks bad. How dense do you think this building is? Who says it's 50 units to the acre? Who says it's 60? Who says it's 70? 80? Are there any hundreds out there? This is actually 72 units to the acre. It's like 200 and 260 some units on, or 280 units on 3.8 acres of land. So I think density is something like, we get caught up in these numbers, and it's really more about what stuff should look like and what it should be doing for you. So in this case, this is another big road, and in this case, and I actually got to work on this project. I did not work on the building, but I worked on what happened after the building. We actually took a lane out of the road, a lane of parking out, and we now are going to have this promenade where there's a bicycle trail, and there's trees, and there's a walking trail, and places to sit. Now, this road isn't as big as your road. I think if you'd do something like that on Tampa, you'd want to be even more kind of dramatic with it. But this is what really should have been done on that other project that I showed you from Maitland. I mean, that building is just all over the road. It looks like it's going to fall on the road. If it was just back a little bit and better proportioned, I think it would really work nicely on 1792. But, the problem with this project is there's nothing happening on the ground floor. But there's other buildings nearby that have ground floor retail and activity, and they walk across the street and use it. And then finally, I want to talk about townhomes because there's some great townhome products out there. And this is about 32 units to the acre, which is about the max that you can get. You just can't do more than that per acre without going to structured parking. So the reason why this works, does everyone like these buildings? My brother designed these buildings. He's an architect. From the same land-grant university somewhere up north. Prefers to live in Florida. The reason this works is because the parking is tucked underneath the unit. So the front door is, essentially like a sort of a multi-purpose room with a stairway that goes to the main living space, and then the bedrooms are above. That's how these things work. The challenge with these things is that they don't create quite enough critical mass to actually support any retail, and because they're handling their parking like this and so forth, there's not really a way for this types of project to really deliver much in the way of activity or public realm. They need to feed off the city around them. They can't really contribute to it themselves. And thinking about height, I guess another thing about height, I know there's, it's always a contentious issue everywhere I go, and I'm very sensitive to it. But one thing to notice about height is I'm actually standing on the 4th floor garage level of our office building, which happens to look down on all this. And this is those townhomes. They're about 35 feet because they actually have roof gardens on them. But what you see is that I'm actually had to get to a spot where I could actually see over the trees, because if I'd have been just over there to my right, I wouldn't even be able to take a picture. You wouldn't even see anything. And the reason is because there's a tree in the way. Because these trees grow to about 60 feet if they're done right. And so there's street trees right in front of me that would literally, I wouldn't even be able to see this building. So there's something about the proportion of the tree canopy as well as what's underneath the tree as it relates to buildings, where when things become out of scale with the environmental tree canopy, then your city feels different. If things are staying within the scale of your tree canopy, then it feels like it's all part of the same environment. Does it make sense? So this is in Greenville, South Carolina. I know Asheville, North Carolina is the greatest small city in the Carolinas, but I'm here to tell you, if you haven't been to Greenville, you will question your assumptions about Asheville. Who's been to Greenville? So we worked on their streetscapes master plan and did a couple of other things there a while back. It's a great town. And I'm not even going to tell you how tall these buildings are because it doesn't matter, because the tree canopy is defining human scale space, right? And there's some other things that happen in Greenville that happen in a lot of places that we find that really work, is that the sidewalk condition is really set up at about 16 to 20 feet. And there's this magic number at 18 feet where you can get what we call a shy zone, because nobody walks right next to a building, right? You kind of walk here. So there's right? And then there's a retailing zone, there's a walking zone, a furnishing zone, that's where the trees go. And then it's nice to have a step strip. So if you're doing on-street parking or something, you have a place to put your foot that's not in the mud. And that happens over and over and over again everywhere we go. So what we want you to do right now, we're going to take a little break and let you work as a table. I don't want to show you any more images. We're monitoring the folks that are on Zoom, if you can hear me. You're going to be on the chat, and Wes is going to be working the chat. But we want you to think about, you've got cards on the table that are individual to you. We want your individual input on these 4 questions. What types of experiences? Let's not worry so much about these numbers and things that we get all wrapped around the axle about. Let's step away from that for a second and say that if we actually had a town center on this site that did some sort of magical blending thing, what experiences would you have there? And what would the character and appearance kind of feel like? And what would the livability and how would it maybe help your economic competitiveness and your overall economy? How can this site contribute to Oldsmar? Let's take a few minutes on that question. Let you take about 15 minutes individually and then work on it a little bit together. So let's take 15 minutes or so and just work individually and try to think about those questions. experiences, character, livability, and keeping Oldsmar economically vital. You can keep working by yourself if you're still working by yourself. But what I want to kind of shift to is a little bit different gear where as you start to get your ideas on your own paper, I'd like you to talk to each other at your table. And in the center of the table, there's a single sheet that has each of the 4 topics on it. And I'd love to sort of have the table captain kind of just go around the table and kind of get the words or phrases that are most prevalent at your table and try to see if you can kind of consolidate the thinking a little to be kind of generally representative of the folks at your table. Okay? Make sense? Okay. Let me try to reconvene the room. And this may be the most difficult part of the whole evening. This is why it's so important that you write things down. Can I get your attention? Now, there are I don't even know how many tables in here, 15 or so tables. If every table talks for only 5 minutes, we'll all get out of here at midnight. So here's what I'd like to do. Because it is important what you write, and we are going to transcribe every note. We're going to type everything that's written. But I do think it's interesting to hear from one table to the other. I'm going to kind of bounce around the room, taking a little bit of a risk here because this could take a long time, and I don't want to do that. But I want to go from just table to table and give me a couple of keywords that you think are really important to you as a table regarding what we might do. Let me start right here with the blender. And let me turn on my, hang on a second. There we go. Okay.
Yes, one of the things that we unanimously agreed on here at this table is that the mixed-use space and the residential space need to be sort of separated. So the residential either scaled back or definitely approaching from a different direction, so that you have an experience in downtown, and then you have residents who are kind of they can be in downtown, but they're kind of in the background. They're not
towards Tampa.
Yeah, they're not in your face.
All right. Okay. Maybe just a word or two from this table. Now, just a word or two, or we'll be here all night. Just give us some words.
You're giving the microphone to the wrong person then.
We're looking for words for Laura Smith to write down.
Okay. Boutique-style shops, live music, whether it be in venues or in a green space that's usable. That green space can also be family-friendly and have activities there. Eateries with outdoor space, and they're pet-friendly. And that was it thus far for the few words.
That's good. Because we're going to get some repetition too, so just that's good. Maybe a word or two from this table.
Safety from traffic, historic feel, family-friendly, multi-generational, retro but hip, and having a theme that can be marketed.
That's okay. There's a whole can right there, which I'm not going to touch at this time, or we'll be here until midnight. Yeah, just give us a couple keywords, and then we'll continue with the meeting. Any keywords that you guys think are important on any of the categories? Well, just give us a couple, and try not to. If there's a lot of repetition from something you already heard, that's okay, and just maybe pick a different thing to talk about.
Okay, we wanted to stay quaint, so we're true to old Oldsmar. And listening to you, we think that might be some kind of buffer, both against Tampa Road and against the neighborhood behind Tampa Road. And we love your idea of big trees. Like to keep it low traffic and very, very walkable and bikeable.
Great. Good. Okay. Let's hit this table here just for a word or two. Who's the...
So focus on the livability and performance section. We had 3 we thought were important. So one was a little bit maybe odd, but closer access to government services and integrating that because it's part of the property into what we do on a daily basis. Promoting the original vision, the downtown to the waterfront walk should be promoted, and we need to bridge Tampa Road to link the northern communities.
Got it. Okay. All right, good. Oh, there's claps. There's a clap for that. Somebody would like to cross Tampa Road without getting killed. Okay, maybe a word from this table right here.
We have the same kind of idea about the open eateries. My main thing is no trees on Tampa Road. We don't need as taxpayers to trim, cut, upkeep them. I think a big wall on Tampa Road would be the best with a mural and make beautiful murals, volunteer artists to paint, and then put parking on the 2nd and 3rd floor. And the restaurants and everything face the green area where we can have in the parking garage, maybe perhaps a balcony. So if there are music, there's not a big cramp. You can actually have a balcony overlooking the green area. And then also have different stores and, things, a little park for the kids to play in, dog friendly. And I think that would be the best.
Great. Let me ask one question. This is like a yes or no answer. Love the mural idea, by the way. If there were trees along Tampa Road,
We don't need trees.
if there were, and they were paid for and maintained by whoever owns the property.
We don't need trees there.
Okay, fair enough.
We need paintings there.
Fair enough.
Trees take up space. We would have to give that more space.
Gotcha.
More green area.
Okay. There's some, okay, no, I hear you. It's different, different perspectives are fair. Different perspectives are fair. Okay. Next table. Yeah, who's your, everybody's pointing. Oh, I'll come back to this table. Maybe a word over here. Who's the volunteer? Who's going to risk eye contact?
We've kind of gone over some of the same things that others have said, the walkability and things and the food and entertainment, community events to bring everyone together, outdoorsy type things, seating, that type of thing. We disagree with the trees, that you need that shade, you need that, atmosphere to make people want to be outside instead of feeling more industrial. It feels more small town, with planters and the trees and that kind of thing, and just kind of make it a destination. We didn't have it on our list, but we all kind of went, oh yeah, and the pet-friendly thing too.
Okay, yeah, the pet thing is going to be interesting. I have a slide for that. Our captain's back. That was Jason. They all said it was Jason. Unless it's Grace. It's not Grace.
Grace, we've got in tandem here.
Come on, Jason.
Tables for games and areas to congregate, specifically checkers, chess, dominoes, games like that you can play. We're backgammon, sure. Maybe. We'll check with Grace. Concert venue, maybe with a dance, well, not maybe with a dance floor, with a dance floor. Ambiance for all types of music, not just certain types or rock bands or anything, but folky stuff all the way through.
Cool. All right. Yeah, a couple of people have mentioned music, which is pretty close to my heart. So, how about this table? Anything on the list that you think is sort of adding to the conversation that maybe you haven't heard from another table?
Areas to sit and enjoy scenery and trees and some of the things that have been mentioned already, green space, keep our small town feel. Be the town, this is about talking about promoting it, be the town that is used in the presentation, like the yard. That's how, create a place people will want to come to and be able to access. Financial stability, compatibility with the neighborhood, good blend of living, businesses or retail and retail. Yep.
Okay. Good. let's go to this table back here. You have the big sheet. Is everybody supposed to put a finger on the nose? Thumb on the table? Pretty much ditto a lot of what's been shared. Kind of to what was talking about, that lounge, that area to linger, people watch even. The green space being a key component, a gathering location. But really the biggest thing is to find a downtown that's a destination. So it's a location where people want to go. And, I live Forest Lakes on the other side of Walmart. But I would love to have a downtown where I can get up and drive across Tampa Road, find a parking place, and be able to walk and hang and actually see my fellow townspeople as well. And also, to be a location where you can have small town events, whether it's music or you have an art fair or anything of that nature. As someone who, when I first moved here, lived in Eden, one of the cool things is I'd get up on a Saturday morning, look out the front door, and there's cars parked. Oh, something's going on. So I'd walk out the door and go see what's taking place. I'd like to see downtown Oldsmar have that opportunity as well. Thank you. Let's see, what table have I not touched on yet? You look like you're ready to go. Give me the mic. Just, anything that you think would add to the general conversation.
Okay, I got voluntold to do this, so remember that when I'm talking. Okay, character and appearance. Southern Coastal Cool was one of the things that came up. Not too contemporary, walkable, visual appealing, charm, quaint, no club scenes. Places where you can go breakfast, lunch, or dinner and do like multi-stop travel, like have coffee here, go there for dessert, hang out with your dog and the music somewhere else. So it's kind of that vibe, a place where you can really hang out for a while. Better lighting, no purple lights. We'll just leave it at that. We won't actually be able to see with the lights. Let's see, a place for music, glass of wine, dog. Dogs are a big theme. Events, farmers markets, maybe breweries, traffic safety. That was a big one. Did I miss one? Okay. Family safe, courtyard feel. I think you got the idea.
Yep.
A destination.
Okay. All right. This table here.
I say that if you're listening, everybody kind of wants the same thing. That's what I'm hearing. We have dining. We went restaurants, pubs, and lounges, of course. Those are with early closures, 10, 11 o'clock. As a resident, I'm going to want to listen to somebody beat a guitar until midnight. Ease of entrance and egress, parking. Maybe a garage would be a great idea. Retail shops that were affordable, socially active for all ages. Lightly landscaped and attractive, but not overdone. Maybe you could help us with that. I don't know. Walkable, obviously, golf cart friendly, kid friendly, dog friendly, event friendly, event friendly, event friendly. We're pretty good at standing in fields and drinking beer, but we should be a little bit better at our events. Anyway, building a reputation of easy access, and we have been doing that for a long time around here. Building a reputation of easy access and accessibility, and I wrote events again because it just kept coming up. And then how do we promote our competitive edge? Some of that is just reminding the area of our geo-locale, because we really are in a great spot, and Ari Olds had a pretty good idea of where he put this thing when he did it all those years ago. We're 20 minutes from the, 30 minutes from the airport, traffic. We're 20, 30 minutes from the beach, et cetera. So some of those things are rather organic and they happen, and I think if we take all these ideas that everybody agrees upon and we get the right match lit, that will be just fine. Thank you.
Couple more real quick. Back here.
We echoed a lot of the same things, just a place to gather and share ideas and be a community. That space is currently used for Second Friday, which is a farmer's market-like event, and so it'd be nice if that whatever's built there can encompass that as well. We like ice cream shops and dogs just as much as everyone else, and we would like to see the area around that space be easier to get to and safer. So the sidewalks coming in, the lighting coming in, so that we can just walk to that space and then use it and go home safely.
We've got an arm reaching for a microphone. Here you go, man.
So we went with the old Tampa Bay vibe. We wanted tree lighting versus street lighting to make it more appealing at night, so it doesn't become like a party town and it's not like super bright. Again, outdoor use, kind of a space to gather. No chains, local, unique restaurants only. Active but quaint, safe, clean. People that work here play here, so being able to have a place to go to after-hour drinks, farmers markets, it'll bring in outside money and tourists. And then for experiences, two of the things that I feel like that weren't mentioned were some way to connect to the water, so a connection or a corridor to the water, like a rooftop restaurant so that you could physically see the water. And then lastly, some sort of like welcome center or statement piece, like a giant tree full of lights or something, so that it can signify that this isn't a drive-by town, this is Oldsmar.
And then a couple folks right here in the back. Do you want to? Are you sure? Who gets it? All right, there you go.
Same thing, quaint, vintage, quiet feel, small town feeling. Preserve our town history and character, kind of keep that intact. And we're really concerned about the wildlife. We have a very unique flora and fauna here in Oldsmar. We're very blessed to have a lot of beautiful nature, and we want to see that preserved. We'd also like to see a lot of special events, such as poetry readings, maybe farmers market, flower shops, art events, and places to sit and relax and rest, some benches and tables, maybe places to gather for coffee in the downtown area. But we're really, really concerned about a lot of the nature and gardens and some flowers and things as well.
So if there was actually something about the project that actually had an environmental component to it, that would be of interest to you. Okay, let me take that and run with it. And I'm watching the time. Was there a table that I missed? Oh, yeah. Yeah, what are some of the comments online? Go for it.
All right, so folks on very active chat happening. A lot of what was said here, I like what Valerie mentioned. As in terms of being a destination, this town center should be worthy, which I think Valerie's referencing the application called Instagram, in which this would be a place you'd want to take a picture of. Moreover, Sean says, as we need people pressure on the street, and so building residential units in this area will help support the businesses that you are talking about, the shops and the local kind of vibe stuff. And then finally, I think that everything you heard about lighting and kid friendly. So there's a reference here by Carrie that this should be a kids activity center, a place where kids can learn and play and interact and gather. So
good. Okay, great. That's great. Okay, let me try to move kind of to the last part of the discussion. And this has gone a little longer than I thought where we would be, just because I talk too much and there's a lot of people in the room, and these are complicated ideas. But I think we're doing pretty good. Let me go back to the slideshow. And okay, so we thought about this a little bit ahead of time, and we sort of asked ourselves, what is a town center? And we wondered if we could put together some photos that might resonate with you or might not resonate with you. And I'm just curious, like if there's one or two things that come up that you really love or you really don't love or what have you. But these are sort of about experience and place and setting and feeling. It's not about numbers and things that people argue about. It's about does this feel like the kind of place I'd want to be? So what is a town center? Is it a place where the public realm and commercial and residential come together? I think seems like that's sort of like a basic sort of idea. This is Wauwatosa. This is a small portion of it. We worked all the way up the street, all the way up to Harwood and way down to where that big park is, way down the Menominee River. Anyway, when you think about streets, streets are fundamentally, they are the single biggest public open space that you have in your city is your streets. Think about it. Why are streets only for cars? Now, it's going to be hard to make Tampa Road not for cars, but the other streets in your town are for anything. And because you have such a great interconnected grid, traffic disperses. It doesn't collect. This word called collector road, this is the bane of post-World War II development that I talked about earlier. Because as soon as you take away network, you focus everybody on one road, and that becomes the only road that goes anywhere, and you can't make that road big enough. And there's a few cities that have tried, like Los Angeles and Houston and Atlanta, and you cannot do it. You can't, a network like you have here will always outperform. So streets to me should be places that you feel like you can be in. And if you want to take over the street, you can take over the street and have an event. We should have some outdoor dining. I want to say a word. I wrote down a couple of notes. This is actually in my hometown. Somebody mentioned Lane Avenue. This is somewhere up north. This was an extremely controversial project. It was frightening for me to go back and do it because I knew my parents would be hearing about it in church. And there were yard signs and people with stickers and the whole nine. This is a very calm, unified group compared to that situation. I'm from Columbus, Ohio. That would never happen here. And there's a first-ring suburb there called Upper Arlington, and that's the Upper Arlington Golden Bears, and that's where Jack Nicklaus got his nickname from, the Golden Bear. I want to make a comment, though, about this idea about destination retail. I want to make just a little sidebar here. In my mind, now just follow me for a second. I go on these benders. There's really no such thing as destination retail. There have been periods of time where certain development entities, like one of them is the Rouse Company, came in and they built a retail entertainment center in practically every city in the country. And only like 2 or 3 of them are still in business today, like Navy Pier in Chicago, but like the Landing in Jacksonville. That was a Rouse project, right? The idea was you're going to drive to this thing and do whatever you do, and then you're going to go back to wherever it is that you live, right? Same thing happened with Church Street in Orlando. As soon as Disney and Universal came on board, and as soon as they learned how to sell beer, Church Street Station was out of business in like a year, right? So the idea of destination retail, that like the whole world is going to come to Oldsmar and use whatever's going to happen here, that might happen for like a minute, but that's not really a thing. Because there's always going to be something cooler that's going to open up somewhere else. It'd be nice to have some visitors, but the reality is that in order for retail to survive, it actually has to have a sustainable, vibrant relationship with actually the immediate proximate neighborhoods, residential employment base. Because those are the folks that are there 7 days a week, as opposed to trying to bring people in from the outside and create some giant thing on Friday and Saturday night and stay in business. It just doesn't work. So what I think when I hear about destination retail and I hear the words quaint and small town, you can actually reconcile those two ideas, because the only retail that would work on State Street is retail that is accessible and usable and relevant to the people that actually live somewhere nearby. So by definition, it's going to have to be quaint. And if there was a little bit more critical mass of residential, that residential could actually support that retail and make it work. And more importantly, allow somebody to allow the underwriting to occur to even build the retail. That's why that one building didn't have any of that, the yellow building, because just nobody believed retail would ever work there. And until there was some more housing, then retail started to occur on other blocks in that, if you remember that yellow building. Okay, we keep going. So again, outdoor dining, kind of interesting. Someone talked about cool. I've never been cool, so I don't know what that means, but I do understand local, and I love local. Not a big chain guy. Love local places. And again, local places have to be relevant to the locals. Otherwise, they don't work. And if you happen to stumble upon, if you think about when you travel, if people do come from outside, what is it you do when you travel? You try to go and find out where the real places are. because you want to kind of like co-opt their lifestyle for a second. You know, like nobody ever went to Savannah so that they could go to McDonald's, right? You go to Savannah so you can kind of, for like a minute, you can kind of pretend that you live in Savannah and eat whatever they eat and do whatever they do and get out of there while you still have money, right? Music is a big thing, and it's amazing to me so many people talked about, you know, and I think the light and the sound and the control of this is a really big deal. You know, this is not, you know, we can't, if we're going to introduce some activity on State Street, you know, within just a few hundred feet of, you know, some honest to gosh residential, you know, we gotta turn it down and we gotta turn it off at a reasonable hour, you know, whether it's 10 o'clock or, you know, whatever it is, you know. So that's a thing. This is back in Greenville, South Carolina, and I love the art that you have. And again, the planet thing is amazing to me that you did here. This is Mice on Main. Someone talked about branding, so I have no idea what that means here. That's for some other day. But I will tell you that there was an art student at Furman, which is right next to Greenville, South Carolina. And he made these 12 little sculptures of these tiny little bronze mice as an art project, and they're all doing different things. And he wrote this little book called Mice on Main. It's like a children's book. And you wouldn't believe how much, I mean, people go, and I'm not saying we should do that here. I'm not saying we should, you know, I'm just saying that they're, you know, the sense of discovery when you go and you want to find these mice and they're in these, you know, and then you end up buying the T-shirt and, you know, it's an activity. Yeah, so I'm not saying that we should go that far, and Oldsmar is not anywhere near as big as Greenville. It's a different city, different setting. But the idea of art and discovery to me is part of who you already are, and I think it should be part of who you are going forward. This is in Lakeland. I love the idea. I think this is Lemon Street. This is like a double boulevard or a double parkway of trees with maybe some larger art, and this might be a way to create some sort of separation and some buffering and some shade. I don't know. And then of course, you know, you can have really funky stuff, you know. You have to decide how funky is too funky, you know. This is the Lawn on D in Boston. You could do O's for Oldsmar. You know, places for, you know, people talked about street events and food trucks, and, you know, it could be, you know, again, this is back to the Lawn on D. You know, it could be very, you know, kind of hip, cool, you know, whoever those people are. I don't associate with them. They don't want to talk to me, but I see them and they seem to be having a great time. Or it could just be, you know, just good old, you know, down to earth, you know, the farmers market on Saturdays, you know, but somewhere between, you know, this and that, you know, it seems like there ought to be a place to have that. And someone said, you know, we're really good at standing in the grass and drinking beer, but there ought to be some other way that we can hang out. So I didn't make that up. That was said by the community. So whatever that means to you. This is a really interesting hardscape space plaza. This is in Winter Garden. And what's notable about this is that it does have a splash pad for kids, but it's within a hardscape environment where they can turn the splash pad off, and they have a hardscape space to hold events. And of course, you can see that it's scaled with real trees and all those kinds of things. Yeah, and it's very charming there. We've done actually quite a bit of work in Winter Garden. Yeah, it's curbless. Yeah, the idea of a curbless environment is you get rid of that 6-inch wall, and it's amazing how people can get around, you know, of all ages.
I mean, you try to do some kind of a social thing, and, you know, have alcohol and people walking.
Right.
And falling.
Right.
I like it.
No, well, it's not just that, you know, we could have a whole conversation about curbless environments, but I think it's a very interesting proposition, what that whole street relationship is. Someone mentioned dogs. Actually, several people mentioned dogs, and I'll tell you, I'm a big fan of, you know, I didn't have a dog when I was a little kid, and we have a dog now, and oh my gosh, I would get rid of all 3 kids for the dog. If I came to, is this going to be on public? Can't send any links on this presentation. No, I mean, folks love their dogs, and folks love to go places with their dogs, and this idea of like a dog bar or a dog park, something that's pet friendly. I think we all love our pets, for those of us that are pet owners. We don't love everyone else's pets, which is why we need to, behave. But pets are special. Place should be very walkable. Again, with this idea of kind of defined space. This is back in Greenville. This is in Winter Park. And again, I'm not going to tell you how tall these buildings, because it doesn't matter, because you can't tell anyway because of the trees, right? Because they planted real trees. And there's some step backs on the buildings. A place where, now this is in Naples. We did some work on Fifth Avenue in Naples. And the thing about Naples is that there's, obviously an enormous amount of development there. But for all the activity on Fifth Avenue, you can still ride your bike down Fifth Avenue. It's unbelievable. And I was telling someone earlier about this project. This is on Flagler Avenue in New Smyrna Beach on the other coast. But the idea that maybe there is some kind of a boutique hotel, but it has to be done in a way that is sensitive to that place. So like Hampton Inn to me is like an interesting brand because we're all familiar with this particular model. This is like what I would call the highway model, what you see at highway interchanges. Now the rooms are the same and the breakfast is the same and everything's the same. But it is absolutely uncanny how if you go to whatever the cool redevelopment area is in a historic part of a city, it's uncanny how you will find a custom-built Hampton Inn. So what I'm telling you is that if you were to want some sort of a hotel product somewhere near your town center, if you wanted that, you may not want that, but if you did, the hoteliers understand how to not give you their 1A plan. If they say, no, we don't want the 1A plan, we want something special. So this is a very special hotel that only exists in this spot. And it's uncanny how you can go to different cities and you'll see a Hampton Inn that is a complete one-off. There might be a possibility, I can't promise a grocery store. I don't think we have enough density of people around here to drive a grocery store, and I'm not sure that we would want people from the outside coming in for groceries. But it's conceivable to me that maybe, there are some models out there for just kind of like daily needs, kind of the basics. That would be kind of interesting if you could pull that off. And then this idea about sort of getting up, some kind of a rooftop thing. And, I talked about the canopy here, It's like, to me, like one of the coolest things about Oldsmar is I just want to get on top of the bank building and look back to the river, to the bay, And so I don't know if that's relevant to you or not, but to me it would be really cool if there was something that was just up a little bit and you can kind of have, maybe kind of like this kind of sort of experience, But again, there's houses right down here, so you need to like turn it off. And you can tell that this is higher than that, but what's happening is what really matters is what's at street level and what's happening within, your kind of human space. Yes. Yep. This is back to the project. This is what I'm going to end on here before we go to our kind of last thing. I know we're hitting 8 o'clock, but I want to give people a chance to just kind of finish at their tables and then leave when you're ready. But one of the things that we talked about on the sheet that maybe I was a little oblique about was the idea about sort of livability and performance and what does that mean? And so it certainly means things like walkability and bicycles and safety for kids, But there also might be some ideas here like these rain gardens that we did on a flush street, by the way, on this same project that I've shown you a couple of times. But it might mean things like solar, or it might mean free Wi-Fi, or something that's maybe energy efficient or LEED certified. It might be something about electric vehicles. I don't know what that might be, but something that kind of is sort of leaning forward into sustainability and resiliency and maybe even technology and communication and stuff. So what I'd like to do to sort of close the night, we're at 8 o'clock and we've I'm now past my time, so now I'm on your time. We have got a lot of good words, and we are going to record all the words, and there's actually some great words on the sheets here, and you've probably written enough tonight. But what I would love for those of you that would like to stick around, and we're not going to keep a clock, but on your summary sheet, the sheet that has the 4 things on the front, if you could try to write on the back of the sheet a mission statement or just one vision sentence. And let me give you an example. Now I don't expect anything as worked up as this. But when we think about a vision statement that you might put out there about what you want and what you're not going to accept less than, what's happening here is this is a statement about, sort of a thesis statement and then some key points. So this says an opportunity is growing on the west side of downtown. The transformation of several acres of land into a mixed-use district provides residents new paths to education, careers, business, housing, and community. Public-private partnership is a shared vision to ensure that our city's kids have access to education, lead to high quality. So this is sort of about what this project is. This isn't about what your thing is. But it's kind of a little bit of a thesis statement, and then it's got some bullet points. Things that it would like to achieve. A place where businesses can expand with access to quality workforce. A place where quality housing for all income levels, a path to ideas and innovation, built on the heritage of the historic neighborhood. So again, so this isn't you. This is somebody else. But I think it would be interesting to if we could take a few more minutes before you leave, is just try to scratch out a sentence or two or a couple bullet points or two on the back of that summary sheet that might kind of put it all together for you. And then what we're going to do, and because I am going to, we're going to let people leave as they're ready to leave. I don't want people to feel like they've missed anything. Is we're going to take all these sheets and we are going to try to compile these into something that we think is elegant and eloquent, that states what we think you've said and what you've written, and also includes some of those bullet points. Of kind of the key features or the key aspects that would make for success here in Oldsmar. So if you could just give us a few more clues for a few more minutes, just on the back of that summary sheet. Try to roll it all together into a sentence. And leave as you're ready. And thank you very much for your time tonight. It's been a pleasure to work with you. Really, really, really enjoy this community. It's a beautiful place that you live. Thank you.